humour, I think, is a way of respecting people's intelligence, kind of engaging them in ideas and appealing to their imaginations. It's a way of being ambiguous as well. We're not sort of saying this is how things should be. We're just kind of putting a thought there, and we're doing it in a way that people can understand is ambiguous. It might be better than the world we have today, it might not, but let's talk about it. I think humour is a very difficult thing. I think it can become very jokey, and that's something that we try to avoid. I mean, we can't explicitly say how, but when we're designing, that's something we try to evolve, is something becoming too much like a joke.
Well, it's the seductiveness that I think we're particularly interested in humour. You can seduce people down, you can take them down a path that seems quite fun and interesting, but then you could be taking them somewhere dark and quite difficult, and then when they get there they suddenly think, oh my goodness, you know, where am I? How did I get to this quite dark place? And I think that's a nice way in which to sort of introduce ideas that maybe they wouldn't normally want to deal with or find difficult. I think that Evidence Dolls is one of those particularly. You know, it looks on the surface quite a fun project, but the more you kind of look at it and delve in it, I think it's quite an evil project, and you know, that's quite interesting when you talk about it.
Humour is tricky though, because it can push the design into an entertaining role, where it sees that its purpose is only to make you laugh or to smile. And I think what we're always trying to experiment with is the balance between some kind of critique or some kind of interesting idea and people enjoying it as well. And I think we'd like it to be 90% some kind of critique and maybe just 10% humour. No, it's definitely not art.
Why is it not art?
Well, I think that lots of people say it is art, especially designers. And I think for us there are several things with that. If it's art, it diffuses it. People relax and go, it's fine, it's art. Art is meant to be strange or poetic or not connected so much to everyday life. But by insisting it's design, I think it does force a feeling of discomfort as people think, well, if this is design is about everyday life. It's meant to be closer to reality, but with that too comes a disadvantage for us. Art can often be really shocking and dramatic. And I think if we were to make our work that dramatic, we would alienate people and they would think it's just too much. It's art. And by making it a little bit more disturbing and closer to reality, I think it loses some of its impact, but it has a kind of aftertaste, I hope, or an afterflavour that sort of lets people reflect on it a bit more. It's close to how things could be.
But I think it's also it's related to consumerism. You know, all of the objects we make, all of them should be able to be manufactured and produced. Obviously they would never be produced, but in principle they could be produced and sold and bought by someone, and I think that's a very important part of it. It's the idea that you could buy this thing and you could live with it, and it could be your everyday kind of purchases of the objects that exist in your everyday life. And I think that's kind of a key idea, that that each thing that we have is you can buy it. So when we love the idea of showrooms, that you see an object in a showroom and imagine that you might live with it before you buy it. I mean, shopping is something people love to do, and they imagine different futures and different scenarios with the things that they might buy. And I guess it's that point that we want to, sort of interject that there might be this different future that they could buy. But obviously are things you would never be able to produce.
One thing we're really interested in is trying to take this critical design attitude and apply it to more complex problems and more complex areas. So one is emerging technologies like biotechnology or nanotechnology, and the kind of future scenarios that have been developed around those technologies, and saying, okay, if we apply a more critical attitude to those scenarios, what alternatives might emerge? Again, not alternatives that we might necessarily want, but ones would spark a debate. So at the moment we're researching a lot into how scenarios are constructed and the history of scenario making, and the kind of myths and stories that are emerging around biotech and nanotech, and starting to think about how you could do more projects in that area.
But we do want to connect with different people who might not normally connect with designers. That's one thing that we're actively doing, working with more kind of scientists and perhaps
ethicists.
ethicists and sort of political science people, and it's interesting actually looking at this new sort of area where people haven't really worked with designers before.